Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the one, the only, Sparkleback!
Hello, Confetti Land! Are you ready to rock? I said, are you ready to rock? Hit it!
Greetings from Confetti Land,
home of the Confetti Bar. I'm Jessica, founder and confetti artist.
and I'm Alexis, head of happiness. Join us here in this magical, colorful place where we
Have fun
feel feelings.
and encourage you to embrace your unique version of happiness and all of its beautiful, messy pieces.
We are so excited to have you join us.
Here we are, part 3, the final installment of Designing Happiness. In part 1, we talked about designing for happy health. In part 2, we talked about designing a happy home. And here in part 3, we're going to talk about designing a happy heart, which I think is really, really kind of the culmination of everything we've talked about. And I think arguably the health and home aspects are a little bit more surface level of kind of the aspects of building this happy life. But I think now it's time to really get deep, really talk about the transformational aspects of kind of happiness and how you can intentionally design your version of it. And this to me is where true happiness really comes from, is your heart.
We're getting to the heart of the matter, Jessica.
We are.
Excuse my horrible pun.
I love it. All right, happy heart. Now this is a tough one to talk about, I think, because again, it is so personal to each person. But the best I can do is sort of distill it down into what I call my 5 tips for creating happiness. They were designed in a way to sort of, again, get you to that self-reflection and to really make you think about sort of your own life, your own reactions, your own attitude, and how you can really work towards finding that true inner happiness. So should we just dive right in to the 5 tips for creating happiness?
Dive on in. What's number 1, Jessica?
Number 1 is be nice, both to yourself and others, which I think is just so basic. I mean, you kind of like, why should you be nice? Like, I think it's pretty obvious, hopefully, but truly, I think it's one of those things that is so simple, yet so easy to forget.
Yes.
And I kind of have, like we all have our bad days, and I'm not suggesting that we don't all have our moments. It's human, it's normal, but we can't control a lot of things in this world, but we can control how we choose to react to things. And I think being nice, even, and that doesn't mean you're like a pushover or, you let people walk all over you or you're just simply a people pleaser. I think you can have hard conversations and you can be firm and you can stand up for yourself, but you can still be nice while you're doing it.
Right.
And I think that's just something that sometimes people think it kind of has to be one way or another, and you can't be nice while still kind of setting boundaries or, being, clear about a situation. But I just feel like so many times we just want to go to anger and to passive aggressive comments and to, just the digs. And I don't think it's really necessary in most cases. I have a couple of tips for how to be nice.
Ooh, do share.
So the first is to learn to apologize.
Ooh.
And I'm not saying that people should apologize for things that you don't need to apologize for. But
Right.
when you truly know you made a mistake or you did something that you weren't very proud of, to learn to own that and to like, if you're going to apologize, like actually mean it. And it's not just like this surface level thing, but like, it's not realistic to think that we're going to be perfect and we're never going to sort of make a mistake or, accidentally or intentionally be mean. But it is realistic to be aware of how we act and to kind of own it when we don't act in a way that was maybe ideal. So if you're going to say you're sorry, actually mean it and learn from it and grow from it.
That's good.
My next tip is to try and avoid judgment, which is a tricky one because I do know like it's human nature to judge other people, right? And like, we could sit here and pretend we're the most perfect people in the world and we never judge anybody, but I think that would be a lie. And you're going to have thoughts, you're going to have opinions, but the real difference is kind of acting on a snap judgment and like vocalizing it and sort of turning it outward and judging someone on like in that way for something that you kind of only assume to be true, versus kind of having your thoughts, having your judgment, but then taking that step back and being like, well, okay, is there another way to look at this? Is maybe, the way that I'm kind of reacting more indicative of what I've been through or what I feel? And is there sort of another way to kind of look at it? And I think like that's a healthy way to be, is to be kind of curious and to question your own thoughts sometimes. And I think constructive dialogue is essential. But I think kind of just like cruel or mean-spirited kind of snap judgments are not productive for anyone. So if you're not like truly qualified or educated or informed enough about a situation, you should be asking more questions than sort of doling out your opinions maybe. And I think that in the age of the internet, it's a little easy to just sort of put your own opinions into matters that maybe aren't something you should be having opinions on in a non-constructive way. So judgment. It's gonna happen, but maybe keep it to yourself a little bit and think through it before you decide to share it with the world.
Yes, stay curious and teachable.
I also think, and this is a topic I've thought a bit on, but I don't love this idea of using like honesty as a free pass to be inconsiderate, where like you kind of say something a little mean to someone, but then you follow it, well, I'm just being honest. And it's like, I do believe honesty is the best policy. I don't think that that's an excuse to just say anything potentially hurtful that you might be running through your mind. And I see that there's sort of this mentality for a lot of people where it's just sort of like, well, I call it like I see it and I'm unapologetically me. And so I'm just going to say whatever comes to mind. I do believe in being yourself and speaking your own truth. But again, like we have to interact with other human beings. And if we're not aware that other people have feelings as well, and like we're not the center of the universe and we need to cultivate like a culture of kindness, I think it's really important to think about honesty in those terms. And again, I think it's a lot about delivery, and it's a lot about sort of the approach.
Yes.
And being nice is going to go a long way in a lot of these situations. So be honest, but also be kind.
100%.
And I kind of like to just on that, like, just going kind of by the old adage, if you don't have anything nice to say, just don't say anything at all.
Mm-hmm.
I also think that it's important to understand that when others treat you poorly, more often than not, it's not actually personal, and their actions sort of speak more to, it says more about them than it does about you. And just because someone else might be mean to you doesn't like give you the go ahead to be mean right back. And again, I'm not saying to let someone bully you or walk all over you or treat you in a bad way, but I'm talking more about like the petty kind of like, someone said something mean about me, so now I'm going to say something mean about them, or kind of those situations. And I think it's as simple as you're at the coffee shop and the barista maybe isn't very nice or something, like, and then you kind of get defensive, like it's just, it could be a small or a big situation, but I think understanding that everyone has bad days and everyone goes through things, and you don't know what other people are going through, that you have to kind of give people a little bit of grace. And I think kind of the more kind you can be to someone who's being unkind, I think speaks a lot more to your own character. And like, that's the kind of trait you want to cultivate instead of just reacting and mirroring someone else's mean nature.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then lastly, I think what goes a long way in being nice is to really just take a minute to think before you react to something. And I know I'm guilty of this in my own life sometimes, that, something will come up and I just like immediately get heated, or, it's something that is personally triggering for me. And to really learn that when you're in any sort of like heightened state of emotion, whether good or bad, that's usually not the time to like immediately act on a situation. And you sort of need to get back to that sort of mid-level to really understand kind of how you're truly feeling. So especially in situations where you kind of jump to a negative feeling before, you reply to that email or that text or, something, you really just kind of take a minute and breathe and summon the niceness.
Yes, it's tough, but I have heard it said before that there is power in the pause, and
Yes.
It's very true.
Yes. My second tip for creating happiness is to stay committed. And I think this is something like, there's kind of a difference between being interested in something and then committing to something. And I think each kind of has its own place. But when it comes to happiness, it's something like you want to be in it for the long haul. You want to be committed to understanding it's a lifelong journey. And, there's never like an end destination. It's like a constant state of being. And so to be committed to yourself and to your own happiness is something very powerful. And it does mean it takes effort. It's not just something that necessarily falls in your lap, but the more you do stay committed to it, the easier it comes to you, and it does become kind of second nature. So yeah, I think commitment to yourself is also a way of showing that you trust yourself. Because if you know that you're kind of there for yourself and you're going to treat yourself with kindness and respect and believe that you deserve to be happy, then committing to that practice is like saying that you trust yourself enough to do it and to see it through. So some of my tips for staying committed, I think making a plan sometimes is really helpful to people, myself included. Sometimes it's easier said than done to accomplish a goal or to complete a task. But by creating a plan or a to-do list or kind of mapping out what it is you want to accomplish, you can then break it down into smaller pieces, and then maybe it doesn't feel like such a monumental task.
Yeah.
I think accepting no excuses is a big one. And I know I am 1,000,000% guilty of kind of convincing myself that I'm too tired or I'm too busy or I just don't know how. And,
Same.
I think, it's a practice of reframing our thoughts to kind of eliminate the possibility of excuses and to go more into that problem solving mode. And it's maybe, maybe I'm too tired tonight, but tomorrow I'm going to tackle it, or, and you give yourself some grace, and, obviously you want to respect your own feelings, and most of the time they are valid, but you want to avoid getting into that negative cycle of just kind of making these excuses for yourself. And that's why you never actually get to where you want to go. And again, I think it comes back to trust in yourself, and kind of believing that you're worthy of whatever it is that you want for your life and what you believe is going to make you happy. So, no more excuses.
Yes, ma'am.
I also think it's important to be persistent, which I think is more important than being consistent with something. I've kind of talked about this before, but I've kind of learned in my own life, like, consistency to a lot of people is what they say is kind of most important. Like, it's important you're consistent in how many times you post a week or whatever it is. I don't love that. I prefer to think of it as, I want to be persistent. And that gives me like the internal freedom to change course, to change direction, to alter my plan, and to sort of have some flexibility, but to also know that I'm still moving forward. And as long as I know I'm not going to give up, and I'm going to be persistent in pursuit of whatever it is I'm trying to achieve, it's okay that if I'm not perfectly consistent with the actions that take place along the way, as long as I know kind of I'm not going to give up.
Mm-hmm.
And then I have also kind of dubbed what I like to call the rational unicorn theory, which is basically the idea of like, I want you to dream big, but I also want you to be practical. And I think it's a fine balance. And, listen, I'm all for big, huge, gigantic dreams, but dreams will always kind of be just that unless you don't have like a practical way to make it happen. So like, yes, I could dream that I'm going to be a bajillionaire and live in a mansion, but like the chances that's just going to fall in my lap are pretty slim. So you kind of have to balance like the dream and like, hey, listen, if that's what you want and that's what you truly believe is going to make you happy, like awesome, cool. But now we got to like back it down. Like, how are we going to get there?
Mm-hmm.
And so you kind of have to balance the two things. Otherwise, you're just sort of setting yourself up for disappointment. So
yeah, make it more attainable that way.
Yes. So those are all the things I think help us stay committed to our pursuit of happiness. Tip number 3 is to practice balance and harmony. I think this goes really well with what you were saying in kind of our introduction to this series about sort of contentment and sort of, yes, we're wanting to grow, we're wanting to sort of pursue happiness and to pursue kind of more out of life, but not at the expense of what's happening at the current moment. And I think that's something that is tough sometimes. We always are sort of looking to the future, and I think we have a culture that sort of suggests we should always want more, and like there's never kind of a stopping point of being satisfied. So it is a balance. You want to kind of even out this idea of growth and moving forward and adapting and evolving with also being kind of happy with the current state of things. So I think, some ways to help do that is first to just like simplify simplify your life, your stuff, kind of everything that goes into designing your version of happiness. Like it needs to be simple. If it's too complicated, like you're going to get lost in the weeds. So I think, by having less stuff, like there's just less to manage, whether that's physical or emotional. And so you can really just like focus on the things that matter most because you don't have sort of all this outside clutter getting in the way. I think making priorities is a big one because, again, to go back to kind of making excuses, I think kind of a big excuse a lot of us have is that like we don't have enough time. But I think timing is really about priorities. We all, and what does that say? Like, we all have the same amount of time in a day or whatever. And true, like we all have different resources and different responsibilities. Like I recognize that 100%. But at a certain point, we do have to prioritize kind of where we want to focus our efforts. And I think there are things we probably do as like a comfort or a coping mechanism that really could be time better spent focusing on pursuing our happiness or whatever version of happiness we decide. I think we've talked about this in a previous episode about how important gratitude is, but I think practicing gratitude and acceptance is important while, again, balancing this idea of, I could still want more out of life and that's okay, but I can also simultaneously be very grateful and, accepting of what I have in this current moment. And they don't have to be mutually exclusive. Kind of like when we talked to Cindy, like this idea of but and we can do that here as well. I think we can be thoughtful about things, but we don't want to overthink things. 1,000,000% guilty as charged that I am an overthinker and that very often gets in my way. So, you want to focus and you want to think through and, again, self-reflection is a lot of thinking, but you also at a certain point have to cut yourself off and be like, okay, go enjoy some outdoor weather or go do something else. Like we can't just focus all of our time, in our minds and thinking. We also have like an actual life to live and experience. So
very much so.
That one's important. Dialing the noise. I think, it's important to know when we should look to others for support and encouragement, but we should also know when we need to take a step back. And, I'm sure our friends have the best of intentions when they give us advice, but at the end of the day, again, like you have to really think about what's good for you and what matters to you and how you feel. So kind of knowing how to dial that back and up and all around when needed is, I think, a really important life skill. And then I also think it is really, really, really important to allow yourself to be sad. And I will say this as often as I can, but it is just so important to feel all the feelings. And particularly when we talk about designing happiness and really trying to find what it is that makes you happy, you have to feel sad to kind of know what the other side of that is. And you have to think about the things that don't make you happy, and you have to work through all of those feelings to really know. And that's genuinely like what makes us human, is all of these feelings and having all of this experience. And honestly, like a good ugly cry every now and again is just exactly what you need.
Indeed. And that can be such a hard one because so often I just want to push through to get to the happy. But I hope you'll be proud of me. The other day, I don't know, it's been like a week actually, but your girl was a little grumpy about something. And I said, I'm going to watch a sad movie so that I can feel the sadness. And if tears need to escape, they will. And genuinely, I felt better after I watched that movie because I felt the sadness.
Gotta let it out. You gotta feel the feelings and then let them go. And I think that's the thing. Like, the key is not to dwell in those quote unquote bad feelings. Like, if it is a feeling you find yourself pushing away, or like, no, I don't want to feel that. Like, that's the sign you probably need to feel it the most, but you can feel it and then you can move on from it. And I think that's the key. And I think a lot of us are afraid to feel those feelings sometimes because we kind of don't want them to stick around.
Yeah.
And as someone who has struggled not only with anxiety, but with depression, I know that it's not always easy. And depending on where you are in your life, and there could be a lot of other factors going on, like it's not as simple as just sort of, well, like move on from it. But again, like there's no timing on any of this, right? It could take you a couple of hours, it could take you a couple of years, it could take you decades, like whatever it is. But that to me, again, is like this commitment piece in this, it's a constant journey. And so even if you are struggling with something like depression or, anything regarding your mental health, like that's okay, as long as like not to give up, and eventually with the right help and support, like it will get better. And that's the hope to hold on to. So yeah, all of the feelings, all of the time. Number 4 is keep true to you. And I think, again, when we talk about something that is so personal, you really have to get comfortable with yourself and who you are without all of the outside stuff. And you need to focus more on you than other people, which I think is hard in this day and age. And there's just like information overload, and there's just too much coming at us at all times. So you shouldn't be afraid to think differently. You shouldn't be afraid to go against the grain. You shouldn't be afraid to kind of sit back and think to yourself like, that's not what I think. And, just really get comfortable with trusting yourself and listening to yourself and understanding what it is that makes you you, and what are the parts of yourself that you are really proud of and do make you happy, and what are the parts of you that maybe you do want to work on because it doesn't kind of feel right. So I think, we just talked about dialing the noise. I think this is a situation where we want to quiet the noise altogether. We need to know when it's the time to silence all of the outside stuff and really go inward. And, if you find, I think we talked about this with Cindy as well, but like if you're on social media and there's just someone who like you find you're just constantly feeling bad about yourself every time you see their content, unfollow, like turn that noise off. You don't need to hear it. You don't need to be subjected to it. That goes for, toxic relationships. It even goes for your own like self-deprecation and, quieting your own internal noise when it's getting too loud, I think is important. So yeah, turning it off and, only listening to the good parts of you, the parts that are saying all the things you need and want to hear. And it's a skill. I'm not saying, it's very easy to do. Otherwise, we would all do it all the time. But it is something to be aware of. We've talked about self-reflection a lot. And I think being honest with yourself about your insecurities is a big one. I think, truth builds confidence, right? So the more you are truthful with your own self, the more confident you can be in your own self. And even if it is something that is maybe something you don't love about yourself, as long as you kind of recognize that and you accept it and you're going to work on it, it kind of no longer like holds a power over you, right? So the more honest you are about what makes you happy, the more you can let go of all of the things that don't make you happy.
I like it.
I think too, it's important to use inspiration and collaboration like as fuel, and you can certainly use that to help spark your own creativity, but you should never like rely on others to define yourself. So yeah, like it's helpful to surround yourself with positive people, and a lot of good can come from teamwork and collaboration. But you really want like a true melding of like individual personalities for that to be successful. So you want to be your own unique self, and you want to surround yourself with other people who can be their unique selves. So that way, like, that to me is where the magic happens, not when everyone is just sort of a carbon copy of the other. You know, that's not where like the real fun creative stuff happens. So yeah, be inspired by people, but also, like, more importantly, be inspired by yourself. And that goes along with like caring for yourself. You know, that means emotionally and physically. And I think this goes right back to part 1 about like happy health and, you know, caring for yourself and understanding that what you surround yourself with, what you put in your body and on your body and everything affects you. And I think, you know, just like food can be toxic, situations can be toxic, people can be toxic, like all of that has like a habit of like seeping into your being and creating a lot of ugliness. So like that's what you don't want to happen. So just taking care of yourself and kind of, this is where parts 1 and 2 really come into play. Like that's setting the stage for being able to take care of yourself so that you can kind of look at this very kind of deep inward part of designing happiness, and make sure that it really is coming from a place that is truly and uniquely you. And then I think trusting your gut, and I think, I mean this literally and figuratively, you know, understand that feelings that you have, especially things like anxiety and pain and stress and depression and all of that, like from my experience, those are things that your body is communicating to you that something is not right and it is something you need to address. And I will be the first to say, not the first to say, but I want to make it known that I do believe, like, I do want to normalize the idea of mental health and that we all struggle with a variety of things, and that is normal to a degree, but it is not normal for us to think that it won't get better and that it just is the way it is. Like, I truly, truly believe that these are all things that we have unfortunately kind of created as a bigger issue in society, as far as, you know, making it something that is both stigmatized yet also monetized in a lot of ways. So, I mean, that's a whole separate conversation, my feelings on that. But again, you know, we said this in the prior episodes, but like, you know yourself best and you need to trust yourself. And when you know something is truly not right and you want to find like the root issue there, like you need to trust yourself, and to trust yourself enough and have the confidence to pursue it and to advocate for yourself and kind of find what it is that is causing you distress. So trust your gut. Always, always, always.
Do it.
All right. And last but certainly not least, my final tip for creating happiness is to take things one step at a time. Nothing happens overnight. In this moment, right here, we each are the sum of every choice we have made up to this point, and every choice we make going forward is it's gonna determine what happens next. And most things worth doing do take time. So like, we don't need to rush through life. We don't need to rush through this idea of designing happiness. I think if we could find a way to ignore the pressure of time altogether, we would maybe be a little happier to begin with. But I think like the idea is we want to slow down, and we don't want to feel like we're in this hurry and that we have to find like the quick fix and, you know, find just like the cheapest, easiest, fastest way to get to a goal. Like, again, there is no end goal with happiness. It is just your state of being. It is your attitude. It is your way of life. So like we want to just focus on building that really solid foundation of designing happiness as like the constant sort of philosophy that we live our lives by.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what's going to sustain us long term. And that's what's going to make a difference long term. So I think practicing patience is the biggest part of this. And I am not a patient person in most cases. It is something I work very hard on, and just reminding myself that things happen in their own time. Rushing through life is not really living it. We need to slow down. We need to take a breath. We need to enjoy and appreciate and acknowledge kind of the present moment and not just be so focused on what comes next.
Be where your feet are. I have to remind myself of that a lot.
I think also like kind of just remembering why you started. Like having your why is kind of a big piece to it. And, you know, why do you want to feel happy? And, you know, why is it that XYZ does make you happy? And just not losing sight of what really matters in life, and just taking that step back every now and again and being like putting it into perspective and just sort of remembering that you wanted to make this commitment to yourself and you need to kind of see that through. You know, taking little baby steps. Again, kind of like making the prioritized list so then you can break it down into small pieces. Like we're not here to, you know, get to any sort of finish line. You know, we can go slow and that's perfectly fine. That's perfectly okay. And while we're at it, we want to enjoy the journey and actually have fun. Like, isn't that part of it? We just want to have some fun.
Yes. And that's one of the confetti commandments, to remember to have some flippin' fun.
Yes. I mean, again, you know, a lot of this is sort of like deep kind of philosophical stuff, but at the end of the day, we just want to have some fun. We want to smile. We want to feel good. We want to feel happy and enjoy all these good things in life. So if you're not having fun while you're doing it, then you're probably doing something a little bit wrong.
Yeah.
And lastly, something I have here on my bracelet to remind me is to just don't forget to breathe. I mean, at the end of the day, inhale, exhale, and know that it is going to be okay. I truly, truly, truly believe that for every single person. And I think sometimes we just need to breathe and remember that. All right. Those are my tips, Alexis. I know I talked a lot on that one, but I had to share them. They're very important to me.
So good. Thank you for sharing all of that with us. So helpful. So much to think about and chew on and work on. Speaking of, I mentioned it in the first episode of this series, but you do have a beautiful, beautiful workbook that's like a fun little companion to this whole series that allows us to write some of these things out, draw some of these things out. Can you tell us more about that, please?
I'd be delighted. So at theconfettibar.com/designing-happiness, there is a free download. And so 100% free. It's a workbook you can download and print. And it just walks you through a lot of what we talked about. And it just gives you a place to put pen to paper. As we said, work through it all, print it out on some scrap paper, mess it up, tear it up, print it again. Feel free to do it as many times as you want. It was very important to me to make this a free resource because I don't believe this kind of content should be anything that anyone has to pay for. I think, again, it's my calling in life, I think, to make sure that people take the time to slow down and we talk about feelings and especially how they relate to happiness. And I feel like I would be doing the world a disservice to have this fun confetti business, but then sort of just assume everyone gets it and knows right off the bat what we're trying to do here. So I think this workbook is a really nice culmination of just sort of like what we're trying to do here. And that is get you to find and embrace your own version of happiness in all of its beautiful, messy pieces, just like confetti. And I am just very honored and grateful to be able to share this with everyone. So please feel free to download it. And I hope if it helps just one person, then I can sleep easy at night and know that I did a little bit of good in this world.
You've done more than a little, but yes, I know what you're saying for sure. Oh, this was a fun series to do. Thanks for creating this.
Oh, it was my pleasure. And thank you for chatting through all of these things with me. I know I created this before you were officially part of Team Confetti, but I feel just as strongly that you embody all of these things just as much as I did and do when I created it. So thank you for now being a part of the Designing Happiness family.
Love being part of it. It's genuinely my favorite, forever and always.
Yay. Well, we do want to encourage everyone. Alexis and I love chatting with people about designing happiness and confetti and learning what does make you happy. So please email us, send us a letter, write us on social media, tell us what makes you happy and what does not make you happy. And we would love to hear it. So please feel free to reach out and download your free workbook. And I hope you find your happiness.
Thank you all for an amazing night. But before we go, we have one more surprise for you. Look up at the sky! We love you, Confetti Land. Good night.
For more fun, join us on the socials at the Confetti Bar. To receive free inspiration delivered to your inbox, you can also join the Confetti Club at theconfettibar.com/join. Thanks for visiting!
Your free workbook, and I hope you find your happiness.
That was good.
I keep trying to use my mouse to turn this off.